be in this place. And it's people
Okay.
like you that help us
Alex,
and help Sanji
I am
provide
now
for
live.
family like
Okay. I'm on your page now. Give me one
Thank you
second.
so much.
at the end of a
Thanks for
rainbow.
your
Sure.
patience.
And we are so grateful and thankful for everything.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more
Boy.
at stjude.org.
Oh, okay.
Sure, testing. 1, 2, 3, ABC, DEFG. Testing.
Mhm.
Testing.
Both of you sound great on Facebook.
Okay,
Mark knows
great.
he's
How much
not
time do we
fighting
have?
alone.
1 minute
For
or we
50
inside of a
years.
minute?
We have 35 seconds.
When the pastor goes up, put me on mute because I need to print something, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you so much. All right, Alex, let's
Sure
have a
thing.
great show, my dear friend.
Yes, let's have a great show. Absolutely.
Because the best way to fight against
How
blinding
is Mike
diseases
doing?
is to fight together.
Mike Mercado.
And for Mark,
He's doing great. He's working on a book. It's coming soon.
for his family,
Give him my
the
love,
foundation
please.
for
Will do.
together.
Is he still
we're
working at the
winning.
station?
Yes, he's in the other room now. You have 10
Okay.
seconds.
Oh, okay.
Fightingblindness.org.
That's I'm running my mouth. Hello.
You're fine. Stand by.
ET 820, because facts matter.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. And it's a joy to be with you today, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, getting a little bit of feedback still. And AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. How are you today? Boy, oh boy, it gets closer and closer. There's something about this Georgia case for President Trump, former President Trump, that is really, it's a milestone. And I want to talk with you about it, about the political fallout. Sadly, an Illinois woman threatened to kill former President Trump and his son Barron. And anytime these threats come to light and when they're publicized in this way, well, it's because not only are they credible, they're credible, they're very serious. Something made them discuss this publicly. I know, have been there, unfortunately. And it goes to the volatility of this political moment, in political history, to be more specific. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what I continue to go to the political fallout of this arrest and this surrender. There's something about this fourth indictment that's a little different. It's a state case. Should he be convicted of at least one of the charges, he would have to serve 5 years and then seek a pardon from the governor. The president would not be able to help him then, even if he's the president himself. We're in territory that is uncharted, but it's, America's always in a state of growth. And so this is what we're looking at. And we're going to be talking with John Nichols as well about Ada Deer. Who is she? She is one of the giants in American history, a leader in the struggle for equality for Indigenous peoples. She made her transition. Very dear family friend. And John Nichols will be talking about that and connecting it also to what the Indigenous peoples in Maui, in Lahaina specifically, are fighting for. Remember, Lahaina is an historic Indigenous community that was obliterated. I mean, sacred buildings, sacred places, completely destroyed. It doesn't even look like a regular fire, everybody, Pastor Thurston. It almost looks like an atom bomb was dropped off at that place. And then people were not allowed out. They could not, and with these hundreds of people who are missing, most of them, the speculation is that they're children, because the children were at home that day. The children were at home that day. And can you imagine? They got no alarm, nothing to tell them to even go outside. Oh my gosh. I mean, and then when people were trying to put out the fires, the fire hydrants went dry. What? So a lot about this that just is not right. We need to dig down and find out about it. Of course, President Biden was there yesterday saying that they're going to rebuild. And I hope that that is so. And I hope that these people who have lost their homes and who've lost their community will be able to go back to it and rebuild even stronger. Excuse me, but we'll have to see how this is all going to pan out. So call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278, because that's heavy on my mind too. So let's get to some of these headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Around 850 people are still listed as missing. Excuse me, in the Maui wildfires. About 85% of the disaster area had been searched as of Sunday, according to officials. President Biden visited the devastated town of Lahaina yesterday to survey the damage from one of the deadliest wildfires in American history. And by the time the victim count is over, it will probably be the deadliest. Oh, pardon me. You know, I'm still struggling today, but I'm here. Donald Trump's bond was set at $200,000 in the Georgia election case. The agreement approved by a judge yesterday set strict rules for the former president's release. He was told not to intimidate any witnesses or co-defendants. He said he plans to surrender in Atlanta on Thursday. He faces charges that he and 18 allies conspired to try to overturn his 2020 election loss in Georgia. Tropical storm Hillary led to flooding, but no reported deaths in California. The storm drenched the Southwest, causing power outages, school closures, and disrupted air travel. A British nurse who killed 7 babies was sentenced, to life in prison. And in Chicago, we have an excessive heat warning today, even though it'll only be in the 80s, but still, please be careful. In Minneapolis, St. Paul, 98 degrees, excessive heat warning. Major League Baseball, the Twins will be facing off against the Brewers. Wow. The Mariners 14, the White Sox 2, the Cubs 7, the Tigers 6. In the WNBA, both of our teams will be playing. The Storm will be facing off against the Sky, and the Wings will be facing off against the Lynx. And those are some of the headlines. Oh, Pastor Thurston, you got to take it away for me today.
No problem. I got you, Santita. Listen, I want to challenge us today on this amazing day to realize and to recognize that it's okay to let go. One of the most challenging things in life is knowing when to let go. When to let go of a job, when to let go of a relationship, when to let go of a belief, a repetitive thought, a situation, or whatever it is that you're holding on to that's reached and probably past its expiration date. But here's the reality. Most of us have defaulted to safety, which often means procrastinating, kicking the can down the road, which can ultimately leave us feeling stuck. And while there's nothing wrong at all with safety, it is, after all, one of our basic needs as human beings. We must learn to discern what is truly safe and what is safe for the sake of comfort and conformity, the latter of which ultimately leaves us feeling depleted. For most of us, the unknown feels unsafe. Yet, as you may have heard, the magic happens in life when we surrender to the unknown. Or maybe you've heard it another way. Everything great happens outside of our comfort zone. Yeah, same thing. But I've got a funny feeling and a sneaky suspicion that though you're drawn to safety, though you're comfortable in your comfort zone, deep down, many of you really want more out of life. You want to achieve more. You want to see more. You want to experience more. You want to touch more. You might even want to have more. Yet feeling safe has you paralyzed. And really, you're feeling stuck. You may not admit it publicly. Only internally you're battling with this, but you feel stuck in life. And resistance and fear will try to tell you stories about why you should feel grateful and stay put. Don't change a thing. But if there's a little inkling, a nudge, a quiet inner voice that keeps nagging and telling you that it's time to go, then it's time to release. It's time to get unstuck, and it's time to move on. Let me say it again. If you keep hearing that little voice that's on the inside of you, It's a small, still voice off.
Dr. Knighton is on.
It's nagging you. It's telling you to let go, to release, to get unstuck, to move on. Guess what? You probably need to do it. Even if letting go doesn't immediately make logical sense. Listening to that voice can bring new and fulfilling experiences into your life. Santita, this phase of my life has taught me that life is all about flow and movement, and that living, truly living, means that we should be constantly changing and evolving. I've also learned that when we don't listen to that inner voice that says it's time to go, life will conspire to make us move, whether we want to or not. Events, circumstances, they'll happen that will cause us to move. And here's the thing, sometimes cause us to move at a rate that we did not expect to plan. And I get it. The voice of fear is loud, it's in stereo, it's in surround sound, and it's untamed. But letting go is part of the human experience. And at some point, by either force or choice, we will all have to embrace the unknown. And as you're receiving the confirmation you need to let go through this good news moment, I want to remind you that it's okay to say goodbye and still feel love and gratitude for what you're leaving behind. Nothing is ever wasted in God's economy. Every experience, every person, every relationship, every bad thing that happened to you, every good thing that happened to you, it all has a meaning in your life. But everything also has a season. And here's the thing. If we don't listen to the voice that's asking us to let go, we might fool around and never know what beautiful blessings awaited us on the other side, in the unknown. Daphne Rose Kingma said this: holding on is believing that there's only a past. Letting go is knowing that there is a future. That nudge, that knowing, pushing you forward, I want you to listen and listen with your heart and ask yourself this question today: is it time to let go? I hope you have an amazing day, and I hope you've been encouraged and inspired to let some stuff go.
Amen. You know, that because look, we're both cancers. That's hard for us to do.
It is. We're loyal people.
Ooh, and we will hold on with the tenacity that is just unbelievable. No one can beat us on that.
It's unreal.
But there comes, it is unreal. And then there is a time, though, when you have to say, let it go. No. This isn't for you, or it isn't for you anymore. Or I'm not even telling you it might be for you in the future, because you might start looking down the road. No, it's not for you. And life is about growth. It really is. Yeah. It is about growth. And pay attention. I've been under the weather for the past few days. And honestly, there were a lot of things that I was supposed to be doing, getting prepared to get out of town and blah, blah, blah. I said, well, man plans, God laughs. At the end of the day, clearly there's something else that I need to do. I need to slow down and just stop. Pay attention. Y'all, and pay attention. And I am so excited for you over there at New Covenant on Sundays. Yes. So talk to us about what you're doing over there.
Listen, my dad, after 44 years of leading that church forward, he has retired, asked me to step in. So I'm back in the saddle. I pastored that church previously and had retired. I'm out of retirement now. I pulled a Michael Jordan. Left as 23, coming back as 45. So I'm back in the saddle. And we're just trying to rethink, reimagine, and rebrand what church looks like. There's so many people, young people, older people, that are disenfranchised with the church. And I want our church to be one of those churches that changes people's opinion, because we're actually being the church and not a Christian country club. We're reaching out to move people from just receiving a prophetic message to receiving prophetic maps that walk them along a path, give them directions and tangible steps that they can take to get to where they want to be in all aspects and areas of life. And so just building on the legacy and the history, the 89-year history of that church. It's only been pastored by Thurston. I'm the fourth generation to do it. And so happy about the foundation that's been laid and the framework that's been built. And I'm just going to add another addition onto the house. That's all we're trying to do, and change people's lives in that congregation and community for the better.
Please, and keep the roof patched and together. I mean, no, look,
That's it.
I think founding has its own challenges, but inheriting has its own challenges too. Most people cannot do it. That's why, I'd love
That's
for
right.
you to really think that through and come and talk to us about that. Because we don't get the opportunity, particularly as Black people, to inherit much but other than bad times and poverty. And
You're right about it.
yeah, I mean, and that's not our fault. It's structural. We've been talking about that. Yesterday, we had Chuck Collins on from the Institute for Policy Studies. It says that it will take us 513 years to reach economic equality in the United States if we're going at the current rate. So I want you to talk to us about, the challenges of inheriting and what you must do to prepare to step into
Yeah.
leadership. That's very, very important. It's very, very important.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm
Yes,
so
ma'am.
proud of you. And and I know it's not been easy for you. I know it's been a struggle for you. And
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
part of it too. Praise the Lord.
That's part of it. Yeah.
That's part of
Yeah.
it too. I mean, look, my father, my mother, and I have gone back and forth about things. I disagreed. What do you think was on your mind? Blah blah. Blah. And then you find that your parents are even sharper than you thought, wiser than you
Mm-hmm.
thought. But then they also learn some things from you too. So
That's right.
I feel so
Yeah.
blessed. But
It's
you're still,
mutually beneficial process.
oh my gosh, absolutely. But we benefit as really a whole lot more from them because they have been here before.
Mhm.
So on
That's
Facebook,
right.
are you still doing your Facebook Live?
Yes, Facebook Live on Fridays at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you've missed previous episodes, you can always go to my page and find those previous episodes there. And leadership, relationship, those are the two lanes that we focus in on. And so we'll be in the relationship space this upcoming Friday. So please, if you're available, tune in. I'm going to talk about unnecessary endings. Sometimes we kill stuff and abort stuff that really doesn't have to. It still has life left in it.
Mm.
And so I want to help us to avoid that trap of ending things too early.
You missed the blessing.
Mm.
Pastor Stephen Thurston,
Yeah.
everybody, New Covenant, Missionary Baptist Church. Where is it? So
754 East 77th Street. So if you're in Chicago, you know Cottage Grove, 77th and Cottage Grove.
Just say
We
77
worship on
Cottage
Sundays
Grove.
at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. I get you out in time to get to brunch. You can get a good table at the rooftop.
There you go.
So we're in.
There you go. And please get on over there, everybody. I'm gonna get over there as soon as I get my health back up on track. But I'm working on that every day. I love you, Pastor Thurston.
Love you more.
Oh,
Talk to you soon.
bless your heart. Dr. Shanina Knight, an infection preventionist, registered nurse, mom, sports mom, dance mom, all of that. What's on your, oh my goodness, college lecturer. I don't know how you do it all. And when I'm calling you, you're always multitasking. What's on your mind today?
Good morning, Santita. So I think really quick, it's important for us to touch on this season that's coming up and vaccines. And so just a reminder to people of what the whole purpose, I guess, of vaccines are to do, which is honestly what scientists do is we know, for example, places such as Australia, they're always ahead of us when it comes down to their seasons. When we're talking about flu, when we're talking about COVID, if we're talking about RSV, like a lot of their things that they're doing in their climate tends to reflect ours. And so that's somewhat of how things are predicted. And so bringing that up to say is because in the upcoming weeks, upcoming months, there's going to be a lot of push and a lot of news around someone getting the COVID-19 or the updated COVID-19 vaccine, which is said to generate a robust immune response against strains EG5 and FL151. which are all derivatives of the Omicron strain that we were talking about and some of the other prevalent strains that, were around before. And so as we continue to hear about vaccines, it's just really reminding people it's not the same exact one that people were taking in 2020 for 2 years, but the fact that the formulation has been updated the same way that the flu vaccine has been updated. And so I know that there's going to be questions about that. And so it's not saying yay or nay or, hey, go out and do this. I'm not providing that type of advice, but just putting it on people's radar that we will start to hear more and more about this information within the next couple of weeks, especially as people are being encouraged to get vaccines, yet we have stopped, the mandatory reporting that would be indicating the numbers. And so just because the numbers aren't there, people may be reluctant to take it. People may not want to take it for other reasons, but it's important to know that it will be on the radar.
Dr. Shanina Knighton, everybody. Hey, Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA. And since our kids are going back to school, whether it's daycare, preschool, kindergarten, grammar school, high school, college, I want you to talk to us about that because, there are different needs that we have if we're living in a dormitory, Dr. Knighton, for example. If we're in a high school and we now start to share the communal showers after gym class or something like that. And that can happen on the elementary school level. I mean, what should we be telling our children? Gotta talk about that. Hey, everybody. I love you, Dr. Shanina Knighton. Let's talk about Donald Trump. He will surrender himself after the Republican debate on Thursday. What will that mean? They say they're going to take him through the regular process. He's going to have to take off his shoes, belt, blah, blah, blah. What will all of that mean? Mugshot, fingerprints, a notoriously poorly maintained jail. Got to talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Dr. Knighton.
Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm actually, it's interesting. I'm going to stick around because I'm just curious to know, what people have to say. And not even just people, but the experts have to say. So who you have on and, what will be said about it. So I'll probably stick around and listen to that for a little bit.
You
But
can.
you're right, Santita. It is very... Oh, yeah, I am. It's important, too. Like, I know that I'm switching back real quick, but as you talk about what people should be doing in regards to safety, especially with their kids, like, I've already started my kids out with taking, they still have, what I call, their little safety kit, which is mask,
Mr. McKee's on.
sanitizer. It's got tissues in there, and it's got disinfectant wipes. And so I've taken them with their little care packages because what I've explained to them is it was actually disgusting because they went to school on the first day and the teacher was coughing and sneezing and visibly looked like she was sick, okay? And was talking about that it was allergies. So now allergies is the new go-to for people to think that droplets don't spread. But I told you, if somebody's sneezing, coughing, and they tell me it's allergies, it doesn't matter. A droplet is a droplet. It's still a droplet. So it's important that you do not get those droplets because in those droplets still are going to come germs. Just because somebody sneezes on you and tell you that it's an allergy doesn't mean that it's not going to contain some sort of viral, bacterial, or fungal particle just because they say that it's an allergy. So it's very important.
Attorney Lamar's on.
So people use that as a common thing of what they don't know why they're coughing and sneezing. Remember, allergies still can come at the same time as having a cold.
Oh, who are you telling? Oh, my gosh.
So it's important that we pay attention to that. And so I would be encouraging kids to make sure that they're cleaning their hands. Like I know with mine, some of them had their phones through today. So I'm actually that parent that's still constantly sending a reminder, like, please make sure you clean your hands. We can't afford for this illness to come to our house. So I am their reminder sometimes throughout the day.
Well, let's talk about that. Because that to me, that's
Dr. Gibbs is on.
okay. We've got Dr. Gibbs. Oh, hold on one moment. I got to make sure I've got all my guests lined up. Dr. Gibbs, how are you?
Good morning, Santita. I'm fine.
Thank you for responding so late. I've been a little under the weather, so sometimes I'm reaching out so late, and I only reached out to you that late because you're west. But please forgive me for reaching out to you so late. I'm glad that you're with us today because really what you said prompted this segment, the political fallout. We have Attorney Lamar.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. It's wonderful hearing your voice. And who else do we have? Oh, absolutely. And who else do we have here?
Mr. McKee.
Okay, Mr. McKee. Oh, my.
I'm still trying to get a hold of Reverend Yuri. I'll call him after we go live.
We're good here. Thank God you, babe. That's frightening. Because Mr. McKee is not well. And I mean it. Crazy.
30 seconds.
Okay, stand by, everybody. Let's go. Okay, I'm hearing something. Somebody's moving the phone around. Okay. If you're moving the phone around, we can
stand by.
Okay. Thank you.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am grieving.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you on Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. Let's talk about former President Trump in this run-up to his surrender. A lot is being made of of the negotiations of surrender. Indeed, he will have to post bail, which he's not had to do in any of his other cases. And so we just said, okay, we've got Dwight McKee on with us who can help us to understand the political ramifications of this. I think that's important. But we also have Dr. David Gibbs, historian from the University of Arizona, who really helped us who brought into, I think, a clear view yesterday. Just, wait a minute, this could get violent. As we bring on Keith Lamar, former president of the Black Prosecutors Association. I was reading this Politico report that said, that talked about the political volatility of this moment in this way. And that is in the shadow of an Illinois woman who was arrested because she threatened to kill Barron Trump, the teenage son of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump himself. She was sending emails to the headmaster of a school that apparently he might be attending. It's awful. It's awful. Whatever your agreements are or disagreements are with a candidate or with a political figure, it shouldn't come to that. It really ought not. But this is where we are. And I hear it on the right and the left, and I think we need to call it out and deal with it. But in this Politico article that says, the threat of civil breakdown is real. Full-scale civil war is not the only danger, they write. Far-right Americans are highly unlikely to coalesce into a cohesive force that could wage war, but an army is not required to wreak sustained havoc and destabilize the country. In a deeply polarized environment, smaller pockets of armed unrest could easily ignite and spread disorder. The hyperbolic reactions of far-right Republican political figures and media commentators to the Trump indictment signal that they certainly do not believe the MAGA fever among their constituents and consumers has broken. And it's not just people on the right, everybody. It's people on the left. People are feeling some kind of way about every kind of thing. So let's talk about it. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. First, the surrender. A lot is being made, Attorney Lamar, about this surrender, about the conditions of the surrender. I've never seen anything quite like it, because he's had to do this like 3 times. But somehow it seems like this is different. 3 times in the last few months, but it seems like this is different. They're saying, he's going to come through a notorious jail where someone died because of unsanitary conditions. And the sheriff has said he's going to be treated the way we treat anyone who's processed. Talk to me about the negotiations and talk to me about what it's going to look like for him to be processed.
All right. Well, good morning to you and good morning, everyone. When I think about this and to explain it to you all, normally when someone is arrested, the process is you get booked in, you get fingerprinted, you get a mug shot taken. You might have to dress out, depending on the crime that you've been charged with. And then you usually go before a judge in a 72-hour period here in Georgia. And that's when your bond would be set. What they've done for this particular case is actually not too uncommon, but they've already went to a grand jury, so therefore their bond amount is already set. The bond being $200,000. So they can post that bond, and with that being said, once the bond is posted, he can be released. So more than likely, they're going to he's going to post that bond before being booked in. He'll go in there, he'll still get fingerprinted, a mugshot, but he probably will not dress out. They'll do the formalities, and then he'll be able to walk out of the jail after the bond has been posted.
So, so what does it look like? I mean, that has not happened to me, but although I was arrested at the South African Embassy when I was in college, and I did spend the night in jail, but my mother controlled that process because she didn't want me fingerprinted.
Right.
She didn't want me to have a mugshot. She made that very clear. And so it's almost as if the police were apologetic because they were afraid of my mother. They knew Dwight, that they knew who she was. They know how she is. Shall I put it this way? And but she said, I don't want her to have this record, but I do want her to go on record protesting apartheid, which, and my brothers, Jesse and Johnny, ended up being arrested with our father about a month or so later. But I want to find out, what does that look like? Because they were saying that you have to take off your shoes, take off your belt. I mean, what does it look like to be processed? I mean, well, you say, oh, yeah, but for those of us who've not been processed, we don't know what it looks like. I said, it seems like it's designed to kind of bring you down the size, right?
Yeah, it is. But let me paint this picture for the viewers, for listeners, let's say. So essentially, this is what's going to happen with former President Trump. He's going to go into Rice Street. Once he checks in, they're going to actually handcuff him. So he will be handcuffed. They're going to take him to the back, and he actually, at that point, he will have to take off his clothes. They go through the strip search just for their safety. Secret Service will probably still be there. But because his bond is already posted, he won't have to dress out. All right. When I say dress out for the listener, that means that's on like the orange uniform or the gray uniform that you see defendants in. So he won't have to do that. But he will have to go through the formal process of getting fingerprinted, them checking, getting the mug shot done. And then after that point, they'll release him to his own.
So, does he from there go into the courtroom?
Oh, no, he won't even see the courthouse today. So this is going to be happening at the Fulton County Jail. Everything that's going on today will be at the Fulton County Jail. Okay.
I mean, and that jail has achieved some notoriety. We've seen Attorney Ben Crump talking about it. There was a prisoner who died there because of unsanitary conditions. Can you tell us a little bit about that jail and about the complaints that have been lodged about that jail?
Well, there's been a lot of complaints. So this is Fulton County is a fairly large county here. It actually holds Atlanta and a couple other cities around the area. So it's not just the Atlanta jail; it's actually the whole county, which encompasses a lot of cities. So it's very crowded jail, actually overcrowded. The case that you're talking about with Ben Crump and the bed bugs, that was recent, and somebody was deceased from these bed bugs. So it does have some sanitary issues. They're working on fixing that right now. But at the end of the day, it can be scary in there. We have murderers in there, armed robbers, and other dangerous felons in that jail as well. So it's not a place where you want to be. And when you're in Atlanta, it's kind of known as Rice Street here in Atlanta.
Oh, wow. We're talking with Keith Lamar, who worked for Fonnie Willis. She trained him. He's the former president of the Black Prosecutors Association. I mean, is this necessary because they continue to say he's being treated as much as we can, as anyone else would be treated. as they're being processed. Is this necessary to have him take off his clothes, et cetera, really?
I think, I think so. Just to try to keep the process fair, you don't want to show any preferential treatment. So he's already, the good thing for him is that he doesn't have to spend the night. If it was a normal arrest, that person would have to spend the night and wait to see the judge to get their bond posted for them. So he is going to be able to get out the same day, but for their safety and just how the process goes, that's how it is. Check in and get all your fingerprints done in your mugshot. You're not going to be able to outlook that. Just don't commit a crime, and then those type of rights will never be violated.
So what do you think that? It seems like they continue to talk about the negotiation. Was the fact that he won't have to spend the night in jail? Do you think that was part of the negotiation as well?
What's called a signature bond, which means he gets to, not signature, but to be able to get a consent to bond, which means he's going to actually be released. So that's a good thing. So they consented to the amount. He's going to pay that amount. And I think that's definitely a part of all the negotiations so that he can get a quick process of in and out and not to sit and belabor the point. So that's definitely a part of the negotiations. And from here, the next step would be for him to get ready to go to his arraignment with the judge. And I'm not sure if that date has been assigned yet, but that's the next step for him.
Okay. And then will cameras be on in the courtroom?
Yes. So the cameras will be there. I expect it to be pretty crazy downtown Atlanta for the duration of this trial. The cameras will be there, I'm assuming, for every single court appearance.
Wow. What will that be like? To me, for the Secret Service, this has got to be a nightmare. And for the sheriffs, for everybody, this has got to be a nightmare.
It is, considering that you have another high-profile case going on in the courthouse as well with the rapper Young Thug, Jeffrey Williams as well. So there's a lot going on down there in Fulton County right now.
Ooh, you are in the mix. And just again, Fonnie Willis, she's become an object of a lot of admiration, speculation, and really we're curious about her. What is she like?
I would say that she's a very straightforward individual. Doesn't play a lot of games. She's going to tell you what's on her mind, but I also think that she gives a lot of respect and she works very hard. So when you think about somebody that's going to put their best effort forward for their community, that's been her whole motto since I've known her. She does this for the community. And she's going to give you the best effort that she has. She's trained over 100 lawyers, a lot of judges as well. And so at the end of the day, I think when you look at Fonnie, she's going to just, try to keep it straight across the board. But at the end of the day, she's going to try to do what's right, and she's going to fight hard as she can. So I hope that he understands that she's not going to back away. She's not afraid of anything, and she's going to be the one that's going to really fight for you.
We're talking with attorney Keith Lamar. He was trained by Fonnie Willis, and he is also the former president of the Black Prosecutors Association, a lawyer of growing renown. We're so excited that we were able to get him today so he could help us to walk through this process. Dr. Gibbs, what does this sound like to you? Because now we have an Illinois woman who, it turns out, has been sending email threatening to kill Barron Trump. I mean, he's a child. He's 6'4", 6'5". He's a child. And, whatever you feel about President Trump, I know because my father's had his detractors. And that's part of the reason my brother wasn't sent away to boarding school at 10 or 11 because, my parents wanted him away. That was the last thing my parents wanted. My parents broke a whole cycle of insecurity by being married to each other and having 5 children of their own under one household, under one roof. But because of my father's notoriety, and Dwight can attest to this, Chicago was such a hot place. My mother made the decision, and my father finally had to relent. He's got to get out of here. He'll never survive Chicago. These people will destroy him. I mean, when I heard that, I was like, this is awful. This is awful. But it just seems like it's a very politically volatile climate. And I don't know, when I'm hearing the commentators on television and on radio, I don't hear a sensitivity to that. And that is disturbing to me. Or do you think I'm being too sensitive?
No, you're clearly not being too sensitive. We have to be honest about this. This is a violent country we're living in. The United States does have a higher level of violence than most advanced industrialized countries, a very high level of gun ownership, including this I find particularly disturbing, automatic weapons, a lot of automatic weapons out there. And you have at this time not just a volatile political atmosphere, but one of retribution, an atmosphere of getting even. Getting even is very recognized even emotionally, all feel it, but it's not a very pretty one. And I sense that what's going on right now is sort of cycles of retribution, and it's felt very much on both sides. One does fear, very rightly, I think, violence by the right, by Trump supporters. Some of these are, as we know, are gun enthusiasts. But it's not just on the right, on the left as well. You've noted this woman in Chicago who, threatened, how credibly, I don't know, but nevertheless threatened to kill Trump and his son. And, this is not the first time that's happened. And I suspect, I fear, this could be the beginning of a cycle of violence in this country. And I fear that the prosecution of Trump, which legally has at least some of the indictments, again, I said yesterday, the indictment in New York by Bragg about Stormy Daniels to me seems frankly a bit silly. Some of them have more substance. The one in Fulton County, I would see that as having some substance legally and politically. But what I fear is that there's a political motive behind all of these indictments, and that this is unprecedented in U.S. history. This has never happened in U.S. history. We are indeed moving into uncharted territory here. What Trump will say to his supporters is, it's not me they're indicting, it's you, meaning that the half of America approximately that supports Donald Trump are under attack here. That's what he will say, and that will resonate with his supporters. And that will lead to demands or possibly actions in terms of retribution, including, and this is what I fear, violent retribution. And so, I just wonder if these indictments, America has a problem here. We have a thick political system, as I would see it. That's true to some extent on both sides of the aisle. Trump is certainly part of that. I'm not sure that indicting Trump is really the solution to this problem. And I fear it could just simply make it worse. I think that will be its main legacy, will be to have worsened the political crisis the United States is facing, not resolving it.
Dwight McKee, Dr. Gibbs is resonating with something that you and Robert Patillo have been saying for quite some time, really since 2020. Dwight?
Yeah, and I think he's right on. I think you have to measure the impact of not just the political impact, but the sociological impact of seeing a man that you glorify being in your own mind harassed. And Donald Trump wouldn't know how to play it. Donald Trump understands that the only thing that's more dramatic or as dramatic as a heavyweight fight is the weigh-in. And he's going to play it like the weigh-in. One of his best friends is Don King, and he used to promote Mike Tyson. And so he understands the drama of the weigh-in, of pitting himself against the prosecution as is the heavyweight fight, which will make him the hero to the right and will give him street credibility even to the little crowd that's there to see the rap guy on trial. I mean, he's going to play this to the hill, and he's going to use it to leverage himself in the hearts and minds of, quote-unquote, the patriots of the country, to say these people are trying to steal your country from you. What are you going to do about it? And however he disguises it, because the law has given him limitations of what he can say, it's going to come across one way or another. This is not about you, about me. This is about you. How are you going to handle this? And the threats of violent responses are real. Now, it's not going to be like it was before where you see the angry mob. They figured out how not to do that again because that's on camera. But little guerrilla war situations, I would not discount. And I think that Professor is right on in his analysis. I've been saying it for 2 years. Don't make a monster into a martyr.
Do you think that is what has happened now?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. His popularity is going up in the polls. And these threats are becoming more and more intense and more broad. Even the prosecutor now has to have major police protection. This is going to be real.
You know, and I think we've got to be, Dr. Gibbs, mindful of not just our country's environment. I mean, the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. We see the Ecuadorian candidate, what was it, Fernando Villavicencio, who was killed just days before the election. Robert Kennedy, who is polling quite strongly, whatever you feel about him, who has a history of assassinations in his family. His father was assassinated, his uncle was assassinated, and he's spoken out about that. He's been denied Secret Service protection. My father got Secret Service protection very early, I think earlier than any candidate in history up to that point, because the threats were so viable, and he was such a volatile figure. They were afraid that something awful would happen domestically and maybe internationally if he'd been killed. So there it is. I mean, we're in such a volatile atmosphere. How do you think this should be handled? Because when I see the commentators on television, they're just so irresponsible to me. And I know because I've been one. And they just walk in and out the studio, say what they're going to say, and then that's it. And I'm like, you can't do that.
I think there needs to be more self-reflection in power circles about how they brought about this political crisis and this deterioration, including in the elite of the Democratic Party and the mainstream media, which is becoming increasingly affiliated with the Democratic Party. After the 2016 debacle, when they shut down the Bernie Sanders campaign and then lost to Donald Trump, there really should have been some self-reflection about what did we do wrong? Where did we screw up? Where we've not been reaching people that we've reached in the past. The Democrats refused to do this, and the mainstream media refused to do it as well, and instead came up with this wildly implausible theory that it was the Russians who had elected Donald Trump. And they began focusing on that, which further poisoned the political atmosphere. And, a lot of it is true that some of what the Democrats accuse the Republicans of doing, they do themselves. I mean, there was election denialism in 2016. The Democrats refused to accept that they legitimately lost the election. It was the Russians, they said, who caused the election to be lost. And here's, people.
You have a caller.
Conspiracy theories, and he does have wild conspiracy theories. There's no doubt about it. But Democrats do that too. The Russiagate conspiracy theory was pretty wild in my view, and I was very surprised that mature adults were even taking that seriously, let alone becoming obsessed with it as they did. And so I think what we're seeing now is that we're seeing an effort to we've been doing this since 2016. Rather than having this conversation about where did we go wrong, the Democrats and the media are simply coming up with new boogeymen. And, of course, the lead boogeyman of all is, well, there are two big boogeymen, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. And we seem to be obsessed with going to war with both of them, going to war literally with Vladimir Putin and figuratively with Donald Trump. And that's only making the situation worse. It's worse, well, in the case of the war in Ukraine, it's hugely endangering everybody, physically endangering everybody in terms of the danger of nuclear war. But in terms of the one with Donald Trump, there's the possibility of civil unrest. Many countries, you've mentioned Ecuador, there are many countries that have traditions of parties having militias and elections are points of times when they clash and people are killed at political rallies. This is especially true in places like Latin America and Africa, but Europe has seen this too in the early 1930s, multiple European countries. Had major clashes in the street with many people being killed, including, yes, Germany in the early 1930s. This happened as well. I fear that there are elements of this happening right now in the United States, and there's a tendency to blame only one side and say it's only the Republicans, but I see plenty of blame to go around here.
Call us at 773-763-9278. Let me bring up Mario. Mario?
Thank you. Thank you very kind for taking my call. This is the issue that I have. Through the history of this country, there has not been any much progress of any president, even Barack Obama, as Mr. Biden. And here we're talking about this fellow corrupted, and we're talking about Russians, and we're talking about whatever, about one woman saying bad things about Donald Trump, and 70 million people that is attacking us. Why don't we talking about Mr. President Biden, about his great progress?
Why do you think we're not talking about President Biden's great progress? Dwight,
you tell me.
Oh no, I can talk to you. I can talk to you during the break. We're about to come off, but I also want to speak to that at the top of the hour. I think that because there are a lot of moving parts here, Mario. No, hold on. Let's engage each other. Well, I'm not going to shout over you, and you're not going to shout over me. We don't have to do that way. You asked me, and I'm answering you. And I'm simply saying to you that there are a lot of moving parts here. A lot of moving parts. I think that the Democrats absolutely, I'm about to tell you. I think that the Democrats have had a big, they haven't thought this through, because they should have had all of their people, the most popular people, the Elizabeth Warrens, the Bernie Sanders, the AOCs, and some other, and the Chuck Schumers and everybody else. They should be out on the hustings talking every day about President Biden's accomplishments. They have not done that. And that has been a big mistake. Wait, let me say this on their part. Well, hold on, we can talk during the break. I've got, as you can hear, the music is playing, which means I got to go out to break. But stand by. I'm not going to not let you speak. You asked me to answer your question, and I was trying to answer it, but you're trying to interrupt. We can't do it that way, right? So stay right there, everybody. Let's talk about this politically volatile climate in which we find ourselves. An Illinois woman is threatened to kill President Trump and his son. And on and on and on it goes, on the right and the left. We're hearing a lot of anger. And it's not helpful to the process at all. Not when 7 million more Americans are hungry today than they were last year. Okay. Not when it's going to take Black people 513 years to achieve economic equality in the United States in 2023. No. We have some big issues to talk about, but this is big too. How we handle conflict. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show. Call us at 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. Mario, don't go anywhere. Let's talk. Okay, Mario
hung up.
Oh, Mario hung up. Well, I certainly didn't want Mario to hang up, but I think that's part of the problem that we've got. We don't want to talk with each other. We want to talk at each other. We want to just make statements. It's very interesting. They've tried to take a lot of influencers, Keith Lamar and Dwight McKee, and they've tried to take them from YouTube and these other places into television and into areas, into media spaces where they have to engage folks, and they don't do well. Because we're accustomed to talking at each other, not talking to one another. Because these people, I can hear something in the background. Okay, I don't know. Someone is in a bad space. Okay, let's clear that up. Let's make sure.
Reverend Yuri's on.
Okay, and I just sent you another text. Okay, so let's clear that up, because I'm getting something in the background here. Where is it coming from? It's a lot of interference and most unpleasant. Pastor Yuri, how are you? I don't know who that is. That's not Dr. Yuri. Okay, do you know where that's coming from, Alex?
I do not. I'm going to talk to them directly.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Okay.
Loud, please.
Oh, okay. Reverend Dr. Yuri, let me hear you.
Good morning. How are you?
Great. Dr. Gibbs, may I hear you?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, very good. Dwight McKee, may I hear you?
I'm here.
Okay, we're going to get Reverend Jeanette Wilson up shortly. And Mr. Attorney Lamar, are you still there? I think that might be your phone.
Yes.
That's giving us a
I'm
little
still here.
trouble. Okay, very good. But I'm so grateful that all of you are here. But I just, it's an ugly environment, and honestly, I'm very sensitive to it because I grew up in it. And I remember when George Wallace, no political ally of ours, I remember coming home one day and my mother was solemn, didn't know what that was about, but and because of my preparation, I think I was only like 7 at the time. Um, I knew no, I just instinctively didn't say anything because I didn't know what kind of news she was about to give me. And she had me sit at the breakfast room table. And she said, your father does work that's very, very dangerous. And, we've talked about this, people like him uh, receive a lot of threats. Yep. And one of the things that can happen, what happened to Dr. King can happen to anyone. I said, okay. She said, and today, George Wallace. Oh, yes, 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 Mom, I know. George Wallace. She said, he was shot today. Oh, boy. And I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Even with his history, my mother, talked about what had happened to him in Maryland. And she said, we need to pray for him because certainly you don't want this to happen to anyone. Remember, he's a husband and he's a father. He's got people who love him too. And he's God's child. This is not the way we resolve conflict. And my mother did something unusual that day. She let me have some cookies and milk. I was always on a diet even then. Then she let me go down and play with one of my friends down the street, Cindy Strauss. And just to kind of break up, to try and lighten things up for me. And there were more cookies and milk down the street at Mrs. Strauss's home. And I'll never forget that, this is not the way you resolve conflict. You keep shooting everybody, nobody's going to be left. And we've got to learn to talk with each other, not over each other, not at each other. If you want to call in, I welcome that. But then don't come in and attack me or anyone on the panel here when you get on the air. I really I want us to establish a new way of relating to each other, because this is verbal violence, and this verbal violence is not going to get us anywhere. It's going to send us straight to hell like everything else is. Got to do this differently, everybody. If you want a different result, you got to do things differently. So everybody, please like and share the show, like and share the show, like and share the show. And please go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. So I'm glad that you are all here today. But Dr. Gibbs, you struck Dwight yesterday too, when you were talking about the political violence, because we were talking about, the impact of these indictments, how this is being perceived internationally. And you said, wait a minute, let's step back a minute. This political volatility is going to lead to violence here. This is where we are. And then just a few hours after that, I see what this Illinois woman is alleged to have done. And I hear the anger on both sides. And, it's a very hard thing to see it in yourself, Dr. Gibbs.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I think that
Reverend Wilson is on.
There's always a certain self-righteousness about this, that somehow or another my anger and my need for revenge is justified.
1 minute.
Is outrageous. And people need to take a step back and ask, there is a phrase, it takes two to tango, and you don't get into a situation of sickness that we're in right now unless both parties have contributed to it. I see very much that's the case here. I mean, the left makes a lot of mistakes. I mean, I hear this from my friends all the time. I'll just give you one example.
Hold that
30
thought.
seconds.
When we come back, I want because we got less than 30 seconds, but I want you to speak to that when we get back.
Yeah.
Reverend Wilson,
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. Reverend Yuri, stand by, everybody. Ooh. Oh, boy.
10 seconds. Stand by.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And my morning stars are on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please meet us there, and everybody like and share the show. Like and share the show. Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia, and Jewel from New York, and Michael, Ann. I'm sending all of you all so much love today. D-Ray, all of you, please like and share the show. Like and share the show as we talk about the political volatility of this climate. We're going to have John Nichols on at the bottom of the hour talking about the great Ada Deer. Many of you don't know her, but you should. Someone who has fought for human rights, who has been a steadfast warrior for Indigenous people. She made her transition just a few days ago, and we're going to be paying tribute to her. So let's get to some of these headlines. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763. WCPT. Around 850 people are still listed as missing from the Maui wildfires. About 85% of the disaster area had been searched as of Sunday. President Biden visited the devastated town of Lahaina yesterday to survey the damage from one of the deadliest wildfires in American history. Donald Trump's bond was set at $200,000 in the Georgia election case. The agreement approved by a judge yesterday set strict rules for the former president's release. Tropical storm Hillary led to flooding, but no reported deaths in California, thank heavens. A British nurse who killed 7 babies was sentenced to life in prison. And the FDA approved a shot given in pregnancy to protect infants from RSV. In Chicago, we have an excessive heat warning, even though the high will only be 81 degrees today, but it will be sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 98 degrees, another excessive heat warning. It will be sunny there as well. In Major League Baseball, the Twins will be playing the Brewers, the Mariners 14, the White Sox 2 yesterday, and the Cubs 7, and the Tigers 6 yesterday in the WNBA. The Lynx and the Sky will be playing tonight. The Storm will be facing off against the Sky, and the Wings will be facing off against the Lynx. And those are some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. A lot is being made of this, the indictment of Donald Trump in Georgia and how he's going to be processed. And as Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Esquire, and Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Esquire, join Dwight McKee, Dr. David Gibbs, I want to bring Keith Lamar forward. He's the former president of the Black Prosecutors Association. He was trained by Fonnie Willis, and he understands the process. And the process itself, I'd like you to go over it once more, Attorney Lamar, because most of us have not been processed, but it's a pretty humbling experience, yes?
Oh, definitely. Very humbling experience. So if normally, like I said, just to reiterate, if it wasn't a case that we were already indicted, let's say he was just arrested in the street, normally you would go through getting arrested, booked into the jail, fingerprinted, you have your mugshot taken, you'll end up having to dress out for a night, and then you would see the judge the very next morning. But in this particular case, since they've already been through a grand jury, his defense attorneys and the DA have already met, and they've agreed upon a $200,000 bond amount with a lot of strict conditions, as you mentioned earlier. So what he'll have to do is still go into the jail. He'll still have to get arrested, handcuffed. His fingerprints will be taken. He will get a mug shot. He won't have to completely dress out, but he will go through pretty much every process but that.
When you say dress out, what do you mean?
So when I say dress out, what I mean is actually going to the different clothing. When you see the guys, like you see the orange jumpsuits or the gray jumpsuits. So you won't see the former president in a jumpsuit when he turns himself in on Thursday. You won't see that, but you will get a chance to see that mugshot.
Well, that'll be made public?
Yes.
Wow. Whew, you all roll hard. I mean, because is it unusual? Well, I mean, there would be no exceptions made. His mugshot will be public, and that'll be the end of that. Wow.
The end
Okay.
of it. I'm sure the media will be right up on it.
Oh my gosh, what will all of this mean? But Dr. Gibbs, we were talking about this politically violent and volatile climate before we get some feedback from Reverend Yeri and Reverend Wilson. Please speak to that, because you were saying on the right and the left, you hear, it takes two to tango, right? And it does take two to tango,
Yes,
and we're
yes.
dancing with each other
Yeah.
on this one.
Well, you do have this issue of humiliation that basically there's a sort of ritual arresting and indicting somebody, and it varies from state to state, but often it does involve a certain amount of public humiliation. And there seemed to be a certain, on the Democratic side, a certain glee in doing that. I think the glee is short-sighted because, as the other guest noted a few minutes ago, that, Trump used this very effectively. He knows how to use this humiliation to his advantage. He's very good at that. And he's certainly going to do it this time. It's unclear if this is really going to hurt him all that much. It may very well help him. Something else that has to be said about this is all four indictments are strongly partisan feel. The second and third indictments were done by the Justice Department, run by an appointee of Joseph Biden. The first one was by Alvin Bragg, who is a Democratic prosecutor in one of the most Democratic cities in the country, in Manhattan. And the fourth was by Fannie Willis, also is affiliated, at least in some sense, with the Democratic Party. She's seen that way, I think. Fulton County, which has a very strongly Democratic complexion. And, the impression is, certainly Trump will say, and there'll probably be some truth to this, that the partisan angle to this, that Trump's sins, is they don't like his politics. That's certainly part of this. Another part is there's no doubt in my mind he did illegal things. And in principle, these are disturbing things, trying to overturn the election of 2020, for example. But it's a double-edged sword. And the fact that it's never been done in American history to indict a former president like this suggests that the people doing the indictments could be playing with fire and could make the situation of the country significantly worse. There's a real risk of that happening.
Why do you say that, playing with fire?
Well, as we've been discussing, there's the danger of basically encouraging cycles of revenge and counter-revenge leading to violence, possibly degenerating into violence very quickly. And again, we noted that the violence on both sides, this lady from Chicago was arrested for threatening the life of Donald Trump and his son. And so you're going to see more and more of this on both sides. I hear from my friends, liberal friends of mine, talking about how we need to start buying guns now. I think if there's any gunfights that go on, there may well be. The right is much better advantaged on that because they know how to use weapons better than the left does. But either way, this could become very destructive, physically destructive. Lives could be lost. Have already been lost. We saw it happen in Charlottesville, for example, in 2017. You could see that magnified on a larger scale, and that's the scenario I'm afraid of here.
Well, Dwight, coming out of the civil rights movement, before we pivot to Reverend Dr. Yeri and Reverend Jeanette Wilson Esquire, I guess these are the scenes. These are like scenes from my childhood, and it's quite frankly, it's nightmarish to me, Dwight.
Yeah, and again, I think the doc is right on, and I've been warning our crowd about a couple of years is that you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And so it really justifies a lot of their suspicions that this is more selective prosecution, particularly when you see that some of these indictments, you've seen people on the left or you've seen the Democrats do the same thing without indictments. And so it smells a little wicked. And it looks like something is wrong in Denmark. And I think what you do with a citizenship, a citizenry, which is fundamentally paranoid and violent, not by its nature, but by its orientation, is very dangerous because in their minds, they are protecting the country. They are protecting the Constitution. They have a right from the Constitution when they feel violated to come to arms for the protection of democracy. And so what you really have, boy, is a vicious cycle, as the doctor said, of people on one side who feel like they are in pursuit of justice, and people on the other side feel like they are being pursued by tyranny. And that combination can make this into a very violent situation each way, either way.
Reverend Jeanette Wilson, your thoughts? Well, then let me go to Reverend Yeary. Reverend Yeary?
Good morning, Santita, and to your guests. The intrigue about the Georgia indictment is a bit different than what we've seen in the prior three episodes. This one, because there's going to be more public exposure, depending on the venue. There may be even video in the courtroom as opposed to the federal trials where there will not be. And so there's a bit of this that is no longer left to the imagination. Folks get to see a lot of this kind of play out. And depending on which narrative they're operating from, as Big Brother Dwight and others have mentioned, Dr. Gibbs, is that depending on what narrative they're working with, some may see it as just, some may see it as horrific. It's the tension that will lead to, I think, a lot of replaying the narrative out in what we would call the public square. Will this heighten the conflict that we see between and amongst groups of people, even between and amongst individuals themselves? And add to it, as we're moving into the primary season and the periods of debate, do these engagements lead to further opportunities for violence? We know and remember just acts of violence when the political climate was not so hostile. Gabby Giffords' very serious injuries. You begin to see, even with elected officials going into public events, that now there's a different level of potential violence and risk that's associated not only to their own personal safety, but then as public information gets shared, the grand juror's information being put out as part of the disclosure law in Georgia. It not only brings risk to the person, but everybody connected to and with them. And so now you have almost like this 4-alarm fire that's brewing, right? You can't see the flames, but there's smoke everywhere. What are you doing now to kind of tamp down on the temperature rising and get back to some sort of normalcy in the discourse? And the other challenge is remember the one who is the accused here, the former president, is not going to change his rhetoric either about how he sees it, because he is the one who's accused. And so you'll have loyalists continuing to get information from Truth Social and from what they're going to see on television and every camera following the former president around. But then you're also going to have this counter narrative that's the undercurrent. In between the two, there's going to be a tumult that's going to take all of us on a roller coaster ride that I don't think we're ready for, and no one has bought a ticket for. And so I think we have to be very, very careful and intentional about pushing back against the sensationalism. And if there is credibility in the process, let the process insist the process does what it must do and not treat the former president any different than would be any other defendant in the criminal legal system.
Well, now, Karen Lene has some concerns. She said, I'd love to hear a different point of view that actually supports attorney Fani Willis and President Biden and family. They're threatened each day. I think we keep going off topic. Trump is responsible and the parties are not the same. Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
Well, I would. This is Keith. I'm not listening to what people are saying. That is true. You don't want to seem as if it's a political attack and all that. But at the end of the day, it's up to these defendants to not behave this way. right? So if you don't go out and shoot a person, nobody will ever charge you with murder. If you don't go out and incite violence and keep spreading lies, you'll never have to deal with this. And so the concern is if you don't do anything, what happens next? Because he's not going to stop. And just as a bully normally goes, if you never fight back with the bully's not going to wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to treat this guy nice today. It's only going to get worse. So you have to support these people that are elected officials when they take these hard stances on people like Donald Trump. It's not an easy thing to do. You're going to have a lot of naysayers, a lot of opinions. But the main thing you got to try to do is stay focused on what your job is in the law. So it's a tough job to do it. I think that we also must look at why it's happening. That's because of Donald Trump's actions. Maybe he planned it to be around election so that he could use it. So people must think about that. You know, he is the one committing these actions, not the other people.
Well, do you think that the point of view of this panel and of this discussion is in any way injurious to Fonnie Willis? Do you think that we're not being supportive, Attorney Lamar?
No, I don't think that. I don't think that. I think that I don't hear anything that's not supportive, but I do hear, the conversation about the timing and how it might look and how this might enhance Donald Trump. And if it does, that's a sad state of where we are in the country, because is this really what you want to be your leader, right? And so you're going to always have those people that say nay when the answer is clearly yay. And so when I look at this, if this is going to empower him and get him more votes, that's a sad story that we need to work on. And that doesn't start with Donald Trump. It starts way earlier in the job.
I think one of the things, Santita, one of the things that I think that we fail to realize, prosecutors are not viewed in a positive light by the masses of people anyway. And it is difficult for an African-American prosecutor to prosecute anyone. We're viewed by a different standard, particularly if it is a female prosecutor. So if she's black and female, she has two strikes going into the prosecution. She's extremely competent, so no one can deny her legal ability, her legal skills. And yet, she's viewed differently by everyone. Having said that, she has to do her job. I think the media has a job to tell the whole story and explain, as you're trying to do today, what really is going on and how, at least in Georgia, they're trying to treat every defendant equally. Doesn't matter if you have been the former president of the United States. Doesn't matter what your class, your status, or your race is. You will be handled in the same way as any other defendant. And I think that's good news. But the media has an obligation to tell that side of the story. He's not being treated unfairly. He's been treated like any other defendant who is charged with a crime, who is charged under the RICO statute. So there's no political punishment. It is what happens every single day in the court system in Georgia. And I think that that's important that people understand. It's not some targeting Trump. Now, he is going to manipulate as much as he can talk the narrative. And if we don't outweigh his narrative with the correct story, then he wins the media fight. And he's a media manipulator. He has a bully pulpit, and the judge is trying to, as best the judge can, limit him. Because what will happen if he keeps acting a fool, they will lock him up. And that will be a signal to the people that he has told, they're targeting me to get out and do something. He hasn't gotten the kind of marching and outrage that he thought he would have had by now.
I think they're going to be, I think they're going to be quieter. But let me just hold that point, and you speak to this, Dwight. Let this unfold this in your remarks. OSA, and I'm seeing this line on the chat line, and I appreciate it. What everyone is saying. Some of these speakers, the panel, makes them look bad for doing their job. I think some people feel that you're not being sufficiently protective, maybe, of Fonnie Willis and of President Biden. Dwight LeKey?
I was saying, but to Dr. Gibbs' point, if I understand it correctly, you can't have people doing the same thing, and so I'm getting charged with a crime, and so I'm not getting charged with a crime. So if his crime is keeping documents, and 4 or 5 other people of prominence also keep their documents, and he's indicted and they're not, it looks like selective prosecution. If he is talking conspiracy and they stole the election, and you have Hillary Clinton and 4 or 5 other people go saying they stole the election from me, and they're not charged, and he's charged to the people in his camp, it looks like selective prosecution, and it looks like an uneven application of justice, if I understand Dr. Gibbs' point correctly, and it's also my point. Dr. Gibbs, will you kind of elaborate on that if you don't mind?
Literally, I've got 1 minute for you.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, I agree with everything the gentleman just said. I think that, motive matters. I mean, one of the issues here is there's a perception that, and Trump is playing this up, but there probably is some truth to it, that one of the reasons Trump is being prosecuted is because he's a political enemy of Joseph Biden and the Democratic Party. He's, in fact, the leading contender to oppose Joseph Biden, who in an election could win. And the perception is among Republicans, and again, I think there's some legitimacy to this, that that is the motive for prosecution. And that really is a very bad motive. And that casts the whole thing in question. Even though Trump undoubtedly did break the law, there's the issue of selective prosecution. Again, that plays into the issue of motive and legitimacy. Just one more point, since I only have a few seconds left. Rachel Maddow let the cat out of the bag, in which she basically wondered aloud if it might be possible to develop a plea bargain when they drop all the charges against Trump if he agrees not to run for president. That does expose the fact that, at least among a significant amount of the political and media establishment, no doubt she's speaking for more than herself here, the motive is to undermine a challenger to Joseph Biden. And that really casts the whole thing in a very questionable light politically and undermines the legitimacy of the process.
And now they're coming after Cornel West.
That's right.
Robert Kennedy.
That's right.
They've done it.
Come after others.
I mean, that's
right.
what they're doing. I mean, they did it to Bernie Sanders, who had the most energy.
That's right.
I mean, it's I mean, you have to have principle-based critique. And really, because everything is very personal now, and that, for me, it's hurting us. It's hurting. I mean, look. It's hurting us. Think about that. John Nichols is coming up, and I want to get closing thoughts from this panel about this incredible moment in which we find ourselves. 773-763-9278. Renee, stay right there, because I want you to be on the air. Back in just a moment on the Santita Jackson Show. Great. Could we bring up Renee, Alex? Because I just want to hear your voice. Thank you, dear. Renee?
Hi, how are you doing?
Great. I want to bring you on the air, but of course you're on with Dr. David Gibbs, Dwight McKee, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, and Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, Esquire. Hold on. Okay, but keep talking.
Good morning to all.
But can you wait so I can get you on the air?
Okay, I can.
Okay, great.
I'm driving to work.
Okay, but you keep. Okay, well, be careful, but keep talking. But but it's very interesting, Renee, what we're seeing here. The panel's getting a fair amount of criticism, a lot of support, but criticism because they feel that. And Mario, when he called in, he said, you're not being sufficiently supportive of Joe Biden. You're talking about the wrong things. You're talking about Donald Trump when we should be talking about Joe Biden and the great things that he's done. I'm like, yeah, the Democrats ought to be doing that. Why aren't they doing it? Hello.
I think we should talk about fairness. Fairness and what's right. The timing of this whole thing is suspicious to me. I mean, on January, they had the impeachment for what happened January 6th. They could have brought charges then. In 2022, they had those hearings where they laid all this stuff out right before the midterm elections. That seems sort of political to me, but why didn't they bring charges then? Why now? Is it because they want this narrative before the elections for next year, for this primary. It's like somebody wrote a script. Trump against Biden, Trump who's been indicted, Trump who did all this, rather than just putting the facts out there, prosecuting in a timely manner, and then, letting America go on and heal. I think this is so dangerous.
Why?
It could end up being a civil war. And I don't have any weapons, and I don't know how to shoot, and I couldn't shoot anybody anyway. But a lot of people have arms, and they've been trained by our military, even though they were racist, white supremacists. They're ready for war.
And
I don't think we're ready for war, and I don't want a war.
You have some people who just come from troubled homes, black, white, brown, yellow, and red, who have access to these guns and have knowledge of warfare, and that's just dangerous. Empowering people who are, Does anyone want to respond to what they've heard from Renee before we go back on the air? I think we're going to have John up in a hot second.
John is on hold.
Just, I agree that it needs to be right on both sides. I don't think that it needs to be hypocrisy. A lot of hypocrites, right? You don't want a bunch of hypocrisy going on. So I do agree with the panel as far as, hey, if you're going to yell wolf, you yell wolf on both sides, but it's a black wolf or a white wolf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, otherwise you get all these, so much of this, it is political. That has been my life story. I get it. And that for me, no one wants to talk about J. Edgar Hoover. No, it's amazing to me. And now we're defending the FBI and the things that they do. They're still spying on black leftists and white leftists. That doesn't bother you? Because we've had a black president. Now you support these institutions that have come down on you. And I'm not saying that you should. I'm saying you ought to be critical as you were before. Just good grief. But stand by. How much time do we have, Alex?
We still have a little less than a minute.
Okay.
About maybe 50 seconds.
Okay, we're under a minute. Okay, very good. Dwight, do you have anything to say to Renee's echoing you? She said this sounds very politicized or partisan.
Yeah, and I think we have to listen to when she says it also sounds very dangerous, because there are people who have short triggers emotionally and long triggers militarily. They will shoot because they believe they are protecting.
30 seconds.
And I'm not saying that justice should not be pursued.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump does not, is not guilty of some things. But as she said, the timing is so suspect. And it looked like the whole goal of this is to stop
10 seconds
as opposed to punt for the
stand by
behavior
coming in, and it poisons the well. Stand by, Dwight. We're coming up.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, everybody. Talking about Trump, talking about Ada Deer. If you don't know who she is, you should know. Not who she was, but who she is. Great human rights leader, a great warrior for indigenous people and all people who live under the boot of oppression everywhere. John Nichols joins us to talk about her and to talk about this as we talk about the political fallout of the Trump indictments and him being processed. He's going to have to strip, take off his clothes when he reports, when he surrenders to arrest at the notorious Fulton County Jail tomorrow. It's day after tomorrow. What do you think of all of that? Call me at 773-763-9278. Or do you think that the panel is not sufficiently supportive of Fani Willis? Do you think that by engaging in this critique, that this is harmful? I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. But before you do, I want to know if you're a first-time home buyer. Owned a home 4 or 5 years ago, but haven't owned one within the past 3 years, that would make you a first time home buyer. If you have not owned a home within the past 3 years, you are a first time home buyer and you could be eligible for a new program put into place by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Team Hochberg wants to help you become a home buyer. They're your trusted local lender. Home ownership is the cornerstone of Americans' wealth and really of people's wealth. Not only do you own your home in the United States, you typically have owned the land underneath it. If you strike gold on your patch of grass, it belongs to you. Increasingly, the powers that be have been snatching these land rights from us, so we can own our houses but not our homes. But look, you need to start with your home ownership. Start there. And so Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they have seen these first time home buyers. The numbers have declined steadily from 34% a couple of years ago to 26% last year. And the numbers just keep dropping. They said, nope, we got to stop this. This is not a good thing. We've got to incentivize first time home buyers with substantially lower rates, which means this program could change at any time. So if you live in the Chicago area and the total household income in your home is below $105,700. That is, those people whose names are on the deed, could be more than one of you. If everyone, when you add everything up, if it's below $105,700 and you've not owned a home within the past 3 years, you might be eligible for this program. Call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to their website at 56david.com, 56david.com. And check out the program. Also, the great thing about Team Hochberg is this: if you have issues with foreclosure, if you have issues with your job and you think you might miss a mortgage payment, you need to call them and help them help you get ahead of this right now. So call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or call them at 56david.com. They also have a credit card where you can build or rebuild your credit. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. If your credit, if your numbers are 500, 600, 700, well, guess what? They can take you from 5 to 6, from 6 to 7 and above. That's right. That's what this new credit card is designed to do. So call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com. We're talking about the political volatility of this moment. Renee, you called in. What's on your mind, sweetie?
Hi. Good morning, and thanks for taking my call. I believe that this prosecution, the timing of it is suspicious. They could have prosecuted Trump at any time between January 6th and now. Why did they wait so late when we're getting into the next election cycle? In January of 2021, they had evidence of what he had done. I mean, we all saw it. I saw it when it was happening. We saw it on our computers and our television screens. We saw what he was saying leading up to the January 6th insurrection. In the summer of last year, 2022, before those midterm elections, they had that hearing, the January 6th hearing, where they laid out all the stuff that happened, had all the testimony then. Why didn't they prosecute then? It seems like they timed that January 6th hearing so it could affect the midterm elections. And now here we're getting into the next election cycle, and they're building this up, the match between the indicted president, the first time a president has been indicted 4 times, against Joe Biden, who has to once again save the world from Donald Trump. He should be prosecuted. He should have been prosecuted. The timing is suspect, and the fact that the corporate media harp so much time on Donald Trump, once again giving him all this free publicity like they did to help him win in 2016, but they don't spend a lot of time being unbiased in how they're looking at Biden's dealings with the Ukraine, what happened when he was vice president, regarding his son's dealings there, but not just his son, his part in those dealings. I have to go to other sources to find out what's going on because the corporate media has an agenda. They want one of those 2 in the White House because they serve their needs. And I'm tired of how they do things. I guess we have to change it. It's time to change the way they do things in this country. And if you're guilty, go to jail. Other leaders in other countries have done it. And we've had other leaders in this country who should have been prosecuted that they did. So maybe we should start a trend and hold people accountable for their actions. And justice should be swift and fair. Not political.
Let me ask you this very quickly before you go, before other people ask it. Are you supportive of Trump? Because some people, when they hear you say that, they would think that you are a Trumper or a closet Trumper. Are you?
I never voted for Trump. I will never vote for Trump. I reluctantly voted for Biden because of Trump. I just like fairness and justice. And I don't like political games. And they're playing games that are dangerous. That could start a civil war. And that's horrible. And I hope it doesn't erupt into violence.
I hope not. Before we bring on John Nichols from The Nation, and of course you are free to weigh in on this, John. I want to get a minute from each of my guests on the panel, because Osa said Dwight has started a game with the Democrats doing the same thing. Name one Democrat, Dwight, that has done what Trump did. Dwight McKee.
Anita made a great point a minute ago. Donald Trump is the first president indicted, but he ain't the first president that has broken the law. I mean, it is illegal for Obama to kill Gaddafi. I mean, was it legal for Bush to start an unjust war? Was it legal for Johnson, who was a Democrat, to Cambodia on a lie? To say on the Gulf of Tuscan resolution, which was a lie, and I knew it was a lie. And so there's a scene in The Godfather where Michael is talking to his wife, and his wife said, but our presidents don't commit assassinations and violence. And Michael looks at her and said, now who's been naive?
Okay.
It's the history of the country. And so it's the history of the country. It is the nature of politics. And so we could go down the list of both Republicans and the Democrats that have broken the law and have done things that are illegal that was never indicted. Starting with Andrew Jackson, who, even though the Supreme Court ruled in behalf of the natives, said, I don't care what they say, I'm going to run you off the land anyway. And so he violated the supreme laws of the land with the Trail of Tears and never was indicted and benefited from it. And he was a Democrat.
Well,
that's for the last 200 years of our history.
Closing thought, Reverend Wilson?
I think Dwight gives a great historical analysis. The difference, however, is he's not the first president to commit a crime. He is, however, the first president to brazenly admit that what he did, even though it might have been criminal, was okay because he dealt with what he perceived was the power of the office, that he could do anything that he wanted. It was almost like Trump believed in the divine right of presidents, as many leaders in the world believed in the divine right of kingship or pharaohship. And so he's operating from it at a different standard. And he has publicly disregarded the law and said, it does not apply to me. And I think his arrogance, not just the political machinations of one party over another party. It is, however, a president has no regard for the legal system and decided that he is above the law and publicly said that no other president admitted that they, I guess Nixon tried, believed that they were above the law. Trump, however, suggested that nothing he could do would be criminal because he was president. And I think that's the
was going to set himself up as the president of Texas. and he was
Okay.
the vice president.
I got to move through these comments, everybody. I got you. Let me go to you, Reverend Dr. Yuri, inside of a minute.
Just very quickly, Santita, we gotta recognize that we're using two sets of terms that sometimes mean the same thing. When we talk about selective prosecution, we often talk about prosecutorial discretion. Prosecutors have wide latitude not only about what charges they bring, but when they bring the charges. That's just the nature of the system. But it's important that we go back and look at something that Reverend Wilson mentioned on the prior segment, is that in many instances, when you have Black women prosecutors taking the lead on often controversial prosecutions, there's a significant backlash against the discretion that they are often leveraging to bring balance and fairness to the system. All I got to do is mention the list real quick and then I'm done. Kim Fox, Kim Gardner, Marilyn Mosby, Letitia James now in New York, Monique Worrell, just removed from her position in Florida. Fonnie Willis will likely be the next target once October gets here in Georgia. So we should keep our eyes open and let's not get distracted by the sensationalism. This is a fight for fairness in the system. We just got to make sure it's fair for someone that not too many people say they like.
Dr. Gibbs?
Well, I think there's a disturbing kind of trend of authoritarianism in both parties in the United States at this time. And for a long time, I think it's mostly the Republicans who are the source of that in terms of things like surveillance and things like stealing elections. In 2000, the election was stolen, very likely by George Bush. But I'm seeing an increasingly a rising tide of authoritarianism in both parties now. And I see the prosecution of Trump as unfortunately reflecting a mirror imaging both the Democrats and Trump, reflecting kind of an authoritarian tendency. One thing you're seeing of the Democrats as well, which I think that was referenced by you and others, is a really kind of respect, even reverence for the FBI and the CIA and the surveillance state, an extraordinary reverence for these agencies and ignoring the horrific records of these agencies. The FBI was virtually like a secret police, a Gestapo, as Truman put it. And now Democrats seem to be in love with the FBI and the CIA. And so I think that's part of the larger context in which we must see sort of the battles between the two parties here is kind of a decline in respect for democracy and, open and free debate. And I find this all very disturbing. And again, as I said before, the result of all this could very well be violence, increasing violence, and that's very worrying to me.
Attorney Lamar, you've got the last word here.
All right, and thank you. And I have to agree. I support Funny in what she's doing, but I do understand that at this point, we have to be able to hold people accountable for these words on both sides of the fence, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent. I don't care what you are, but get back to why you got elected. The reason people are elected you are to help the people, help your community, help your cities that you live in, not just help yourself. So I'm hoping that both parties are listening to this and understand that we're tired of the fact that we have to debate this. Donald Trump is out of control. He's pushed the limits to the extreme. The Democrats back in the day did try to say that the guy had stole the election. But guess what? We got to stop it on both sides. I think Donald Trump pushed it up to a whole new level we had never seen before. I don't think anybody has ever seen it the way Donald Trump went on the last few years of his presidency. So with that being said, I just hope that people look at the facts. I understand the political nature, but I hope that politicians understand that stop being so political and get back to serving your community, because that's what we really need in the country. So
Wow, what a conversation. John Nichols. We're talking about Ada Deer. Very, very different. I had to call my mother, who absolutely adored Ada Deer. But, feel free to weigh in on this. I mean, because, this is someone who was active in the fight for equality all of her life. And this is, I guess we're just talking about fairness, equality, and making America what it's supposed to be. Who was Ada Deer? And, just take this for the last 7-8 minutes. You just take this wherever you want to go.
Well, thanks, Santita. Thanks to all the wise folks who've made good comments on the politics of the moment. And it is easy to get frustrated by, the timing of things and the sort of cacophony of troubles we have related to Donald Trump, I'll quickly say that I think it's important that that former presidents be held to account, just as presidents be held to account. And the timing can be frustrating. It can be difficult. But at the end of the day, we've passed so frequently on the responsibility to hold presidents to account and former presidents that we've ended up with an imperial presidency. We have a federal government that too frequently does what it wants without much concern for what's going on in the lives of the great mass of Americans. And so I'm glad that we have these accountability moments, even if the timing may be difficult. And that does relate in many ways to Ada Deer, the woman who we'll talk about for a couple of minutes here. Ada Deer was, in many senses, one of, if not the greatest, activists for Native American solidarity and sovereignty in this country and in the last century especially, but even into this century. Ada Deer was born on the Menominee Indian Reservation up in northern Wisconsin in 1935. And that was at a time when the Menominee, while not wealthy, had a decent level of control over their circumstances and their resources. They had timber and lumber operations in that region, and they managed them well. And then in the 1950s, when Ada Deer was a young woman, the federal government ended recognition of the Menominee. They took away its recognized status as a tribe as part of a broad process of trying to end tribal status. And when they did this, almost unbelievably, they took the assets of the tribe, that which the tribe owned, and turned it into a corporation. And that corporation was badly managed. It quickly went into financial trouble. They also made what had been the native lands there into a county of the state of Wisconsin, and almost immediately that became the poorest county in the state of Wisconsin. And so Ada Deer came of age at a time when her tribe was literally being erased, being written off the records, being restructured in a way that made the Menominee poorer, less sovereign, less powerful. And she objected. With a handful of other young people in the 1960s, early 1970s, they formed a movement to renew the tribal status and to renew the sovereignty of the tribe. The reason we know about this is that it was so successful. They took over that board of that corporation and began to turn its policies away from developing the land for white people back toward benefiting Native peoples. They took over power ultimately in that county. But more importantly, they sent Ada Deer as a young woman to Washington to lobby Congress to restore tribal status. And she succeeded. In 1973, Richard Nixon, of all people, Richard Nixon signed a bill that restored the tribal status. Within roughly a year, Ada Deer became the first woman to lead that tribe as chair of the Menominee. And also the model that they created for restoration of tribal status became a model for tribes across the United States. Eventually, she was such a powerful figure in this regard that Bill Clinton made her the head of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, first Native woman ever to lead that bureau. And therein, she restored status for many tribes and extended status to the native villages of Alaska. I mean, really, this was a transformational figure. And she did it all with an incredible humbleness, very thoughtful, very kind, very, always seeking to nurture up new leaders. But when we think about the history of the 20th century, and we look at the great civil rights leaders seeking to end segregation and Jim Crow, we think of the great Latinx leaders, Cesar Chavez, and others seeking to extend and expand the rights for Hispanic Americans. It is important to put Ada Deer in that context and remember that she was a dynamic leader of the 1960s and 1970s who then extended that dynamism decades after on behalf of Native sovereignty. If she had not done what she did, and if she had not been so good at what she did, tribes across this country would be far less powerful, far less able to guide their own affairs.
In the last 2 minutes, what is the danger of us not teaching about an Ada deer, for example? I mean, because this is, we're pushing back against telling the whole story of America, telling the whole story of the world. 90 seconds, they belong to you.
I saw what you did there, Santita, and of course, you're exactly right. This is very connected to these great battles over the teaching of the whole history of the United States. And frequently, when we talk about, trying to limit the teaching of history, something that Ron DeSantis and others have done, we talk about in the context of the civil rights movement. We talk about in the broader context of segregation, slavery, enslavement, and all the history there. But we must understand that this undoing of history by the right also affects Latinx people, it affects indigenous peoples. And Ada Deer is a very good example of this, because when we study Ada Deer's incredible life, when we study all that she did, we recognize that Native peoples in this country have had to fight not merely for respect, but literally for their right to exist as communities. That has been attacked in the lifetimes of Americans today, that there were efforts to take away tribal sovereignty. And Ada Deer's battle to restore it is one of the epic civil rights and social justice struggles of our time. It ought to be taught in every school as part of a broad curriculum that teaches about all the peoples of this country, including the First Peoples, the indigenous peoples, who have been so frequently attacked and so frequently denied.
And theirs is the most American story of all. God bless you, Ada Deer. God bless you, John Nichols. God bless you, my wonderful panel. I love you, everybody. God bless you. Have a great day. John Nichols, now you know I can't let you get away without weighing in on this Trump piece.
Well, I agree, appreciate that. I have to go pretty soon. I apologize, but I will say that I thought the discourse on the panel was really great and really powerful, and it put so much into perspective. This is something we need to understand. We can be very frustrated by all of the issues related to Donald Trump, going back to the fact that he should have been impeached and removed in 2020. In the initial impeachment, he should have been impeached and removed. He was impeached, but should have been removed in 2021 after the insurrection. And there was a failure there on the part of the legislative process, on the part of the constitutional process. Now it's been pushed into the courts. But what is so important is this issue of presidential accountability. Forget about Trump. Forget about the man. Understand the problem with the office. The office of the presidency has become imperial. Presidents do what they want. They even now, with Trump, extend their purview to claiming that when they've been defeated by the voters, they can still claim the office. And that is not, in any sense, how the American people want their country run. But unfortunately, that is how Trump and his supporters sought to run it in 2021. And the fact is that now Donald Trump and his supporters seek to extend that imperial presidency into the former presidency, the ex-presidency, and saying, that there's something that he's being unfairly prosecuted. He is not being unfairly prosecuted. He is being prosecuted more gently than the average American would be if they did the same things Trump had done. And so what we need to understand is this. Donald Trump wants an imperial presidency, and he wants an imperial ex-presidency. Prosecuting him holds him to account personally, but more importantly, beyond the issues of Trump's own wrongdoing, it begins a process of undoing the imperial presidency and restoring the executive branch to its proper place, not as the first among equals or the superior branch, but in fact what the writers, the authors of the Constitution intended, that the Congress would be the first branch because it is elected more directly by the people, and that the executive branch would be deferent to, respectful of that superior authority of the Congress. We've got everything all screwed up in America. We have a presidency that is way too powerful, and it is absolutely vital to undo much of that power so that we again have a perspective where we don't have a president who is like a king, but rather have a president who is a servant of the American people.
Well, because we have to fight these imperial impulses. I can't help but think of Mitch McConnell. Yep. No, I'm not going to interview Merrick Garland, and he shut that process down. And I just
that's right.
And for me, this is yeah. I mean, there's this strain, this autocratic, authoritarian, really un-American strain that's coursing through the American body politic right now, and our sociology and even our psychology, and it's very unsettling, John.
It is unsettling, and the trouble is, you can always find an excuse not to address it, right? There's always somebody who says, well, yeah, but there's other things going on, or we need to move on. We need to, put these troubles in the past and go to another place. The trouble with that, the unsettling reality of that is that we never get around to addressing the fundamental core structural problems. And the core structural problem is this. We have presidents in the United States who can be elected without a majority of the vote. In fact, can be defeated in the popular vote and still become president because of the lingering reality of the Electoral College, an institution created in the days at the founding of the country when we still allowed the enslavement of people. And many of those founders did not want to have popular democracy. They feared it because they feared that enslaved people, indentured servants, and others would ultimately rise up and demand a fair distribution of power, a fair distribution of the goods of the country. And so they created an unfair system. That unfair system lingers to this day and, again, allows us to have presidents, quote unquote, elected without popular support or without sufficient popular support. Then when those presidents take power, they exercise that power in ways that are not like that of a president, but like that of a king. And so you've got this double bind. People who are not fairly elected by any reasonable standard, exercising powers that they were never expected to or intended to exercise. And then, in the case of Donald Trump, seeking to retain those powers even after they are defeated for re-election. So you've got a real mess as regards a power imbalance. And the way to undo that is to hold people to account. And a beginning point are these prosecutions of Donald Trump and those associated with him, especially for issues related to the elections of 2020. And that's what you're seeing with Jack Smith's indictment in Washington and also with the indictment in Georgia. These are very, very important indictments. Unfortunately, it'll all turn into a lot of political theater. We know that happens, but we have to always keep our eye on the prize. And the prize is a process by which, using the legal powers of this country, we begin to undo the imperial presidency. That undoing of the imperial presidency should also extend to the Congress. There should be more and more efforts to renew the power of Congress to actually have a proper say as regards declaring wars and as regards all sorts of other policies. But at core of it, we understand what we're about, that we are about diminishing the powers of the presidency, so it is no longer an imperial presidency, so it is no longer an elected monarchy. Then it all starts to make, I think, a lot of sense. And even as we have this difficult reality of a prosecution of a former president intersecting with the next presidential election, we have some clarity as regards what is trying to be achieved.
And I think that if we get this right, then we will also pursue not just people who function in the democracy, but people who form the corporatocracy. We've not gone after Wall Street. We've not gone after the people who make our, I would hope that this would begin to permeate the culture, because you've had more billionaires created during the pandemic than at any time in our history. We've seen the greatest wealth transfer in history happen. And these people are making our lives miserable, and you're not these elected officials. Don't talk to me about lobbyists. Talk to me about the people who pay the lobbyists. These people are making our lives a living hell. 7 million more people are hungry today in America than were last year. And no one is talking about that. The corporate media, you need to call all of the stations and let them know that you don't appreciate the fact that they're not talking about people who are hungry in America today. They need to be talking about the fact that it's going to take 513 years for Black people to achieve economic economic equality in the United States today. They have mentioned the way you can eliminate someone from viability is not to mention their name. All they've ever done was mention Donald Trump's name. So I can't help but think that y'all like him. And don't tell me it's because of ratings. No, there's something else going on here. This is someone who would go broke and get $1 billion from a bank, go broke again, get another $1 billion from a bank. Most of us can't even get a mortgage. I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh boy, there's an old song in the Black tradition, John. It's called "Get Right, Church," and we need to get right, all of us, all of us. And
What a great note on which to circle around again. I apologize that I have to head on, but I will tell you that. Let me tell you, I love you too, and I love this show. I love the thoughtful dialogue and the fact that that when we were talking about all these accountability issues, we come back to a spiritual in the Black tradition, because ultimately it is in faith, and many forms of faith, not just one, but in faith we are often introduced to morality and to a sense of morality, and that sense of morality is something that guides us. Ideally, as we deal with government, doesn't mean that this is a religious country per se. It doesn't mean that this is a country, a religious state like the old monarchies and fiefdoms of Europe. This is a place with a diversity of religion and with an honest discourse about these issues. And yet, all of us bring a sense of morality to this. And when we apply that sense of morality spelled out in so many of the great texts of so many of the great religions and in so many of the great texts of our thinkers throughout history, when we apply that morality, it simply makes sense to say that the president of the United States should not be a king, a czar, a monarch, a ruler. The president of the United States should be a servant of the people. The only way we're going to get back to that is if we hold presidents and ex-presidents who do wrong to account for their wrongdoing. And that's what's happening now. And it is an encouraging process. It is a good process. It is a healthy process for America.
I agree. And step back and let's look at the big picture. There's a direct line between the Vietnamese monks, Rabbi Heschel, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Mohandas Gandhi, and on and on and on. These people had different paths to God, but that's what they were seeking. So let's not get caught up in how we see the world. At some point, if our eyes are clear, we will see each other as brothers and sisters who all want to have a good world. A world of which we are stewards, John, where we're not supposed to be blowing each other to bits, either with guns or with bombs. So come on, everybody, let's grow up in our politics. Let's change this thing around. We can do that. John, is there anything you want to say before we go?
Just thank you, my dear. Thank you for the wonderful work you do.
Oh, I love you.
And thank you for on this show. I have to say, I love hearing Dwight's voice every time I'm on.
Dwight, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you.
I got
it. And before you go, John, before you make a tremendous point. Is that the power of the civil rights movement for us was moral persuasion. Dr. King challenged John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy with a moral imperative to do better. He challenged Lyndon Johnson, who was a Southern, quote-unquote, Southern racist, based on a moral to do right. One of the things we've lost as a beloved community is we've conceded our narrative to the Democratic Party, and we take their talking points and turn that into our narrative rather than stay in our tradition, which is a tradition of moral suasion. Trump is a bad person, but he is not a person beyond reproach and not a person beyond conversion. And we could have loved him into becoming a better person, believe it or not. as we had to love Biden, who was fundamentally a racist, into becoming a better person. And so I'm hoping that as a community, we don't lose that and understand what our purpose is and where our power lies.
I agree. There's an old African proverb. Well, it's actually not a proverb. It's actually an allegory. They tell a story about how how an African village would punish someone who had committed a crime. They wouldn't punish them as much as they would correct them. They put them in the center of the village, and all of the villagers would have to walk around them for hours and tell them all of the good things that they are and have done. And what if we had that kind of approach where we built people up instead of tearing them down? I'm just with that. Lonnie Guinier said, we need to have win-win scenarios, not I win, you lose, or I lose and you win. That just embitters people. Everybody ought to be able to get something. You're not going to get everything you want, but you can get all of your needs met. That's the world. That's the way the world was made. If you got everything you want, we'd have a mess because you don't know what God needs of you. Think about that, everybody. I love you, John. I know you're running, and you've given us a lot of time today, but thank you. Reverend Dr. Yuri, I don't know if you're still there. Is anyone else still here? Attorney Lamar, Jeanette Wilson, Dwight McKee. Dwight, you're still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, why don't you give us a closing thought?
Well, that was my closing thought. I'm hoping that I know people think that because I said that a Trumpite,
yes.
anti-Biden, and what the fact matter is that most presidents, most people of power are flawed people. And there is a thing in the Bible where you, as opposed to always attack the king, then you can convert the king. The story of Esther is a story where she and Mordecai, a king, as opposed to wicked Haman, who always tried to use the king's worst nature against other people. They found his better nature and turned him to a hero for the poor and the oppressed. And so there is a tendency for us now not to go to the moral imperative that is our real strength, but to pick up the Democratic Party narrative. And we become extensions of them. And it reduces real power, which is the power to love and to convert. And if you understood who Dr. King was and understood who our ancestors was, Frederick Douglass was, that was the approach that they took. He and his peers, they actually converted Lincoln into the Emancipation Proclamation by the power of persuasion. And we have to always keep that in mind. And though Trump, is not the best guy, had we played that card.
Dwight, what did you just say? You went out. You went out.
Even though Trump is not a great guy, he was much more negotiable had we played that card and taken him. He was, again, looking for, love, and he's an insecure old man whose father, beat him down, whose brother committed suicide because his daddy beat him down. And so he's more lost than he is evil. And we could have led him into a much more moral path had we played that card, as we did with Biden.
Mm-hmm. And we have to do it all the time. That's why I get it. All this hatred that we've got, it's not in our tradition. And I cannot sign up for it. I can't. I'm so glad that God didn't feel that I was beyond redemption on my worst day, in my worst moment. And we have to think about that. What do
You talked about George Wallace. I remember, and when he got shot, and he was the enemy of the Negro.
Oh my gosh!
Is your father went to see him and prayed with him when he was in the hospital? That's the moral imperative.
It's important. People look at you like you're crazy. And my father said, you never cede the moral high ground. And the only reason that you look down on anyone is if you're extending your hand to bring them up. Because we're all on a slippery slope, everybody. We all are. And I'm going to hold on to maybe the opportunity to love someone into redemption, as I have been loved into what I hope is healthfulness. Really. I feel this way because I can tell you on my worst days, my father always made me feel like I was the best thing that ever happened to him. Dwight, have you ever seen this movie, The Five Heartbeats?
I have.
Okay. And Terry Williams, the famed PR maven out of New York, called me when I lived in New York. And she asked me to come and see it at a special screening. And she said, after the screening, because people were in tears, she said, I really want you to tell your father about it because we need to get the word out about this movie. But I have a feeling that Reverend's going to love this. I called Daddy that night and he said, oh, well, I'll see it. Just, let's work it out, which we did do. My father called me after the screening in tears. I said, wow, Dad. And my father's he is not afraid to cry. He said, thank you for this. He said, I'm going to reach out to Robert Townsend, if not tonight, first thing in the morning. Because this was one of the few times that I've seen Black men portrayed as human beings, people who love and who live and who make mistakes and who fall down and who get up. He said this was just, and I even saw Dwight, my own story in there. When Harry Lennox's character was going to leave the group because his girlfriend was pregnant and he loved her more than anything, but he said, I've got to take care of her. But, the head of the record company says that I could abort the child. And his fellow group members said, oh, no. You just said you loved her, right? More than anything in this world. Yep. And the money that they had is they were eating out the same chicken bucket. He said, don't do that. Go on and marry her and we will figure it out. And I said, oh boy, that was my parents' story with me. So, I think that we need to give each other the space, love each other, give each other the space to fall down, get up. You've given Joe Biden that space. You might not know it, but he has had a horrific racial record. It's been horrific. And at LBJ, not a great record at all. But when given the opportunity, and when given the space, and when given the grace, they've done some great things. And that can be your story too. When given the space, when given the grace, when given the opportunity, you too can do great things. So let's take all this hate out of this discussion, everybody. Because this grace and this space, and we need to give to Donald Trump and everybody else, you're going to need it one day too. Keep on living, as my parents used to say, Dwight. As your mother would say to me, baby, keep on living. Keep on living. You get on the other side of what you see, of what you say about someone, what you think about someone, what you accuse someone of doing or being. You keep on living. Live long enough, and you will get on the other side of that, and it won't feel too great. So just try to be nice. Just try to, more than that, try to be a good person. And try to give people some space. And work on giving people some grace. We can do that. Dwight, is there anything you'd like to say before we go?
Assalamu alaikum.
Do you even know what you're saying, Dwight?
Peace be with you.
All right, and also unto you. But boy, oh boy, oh boy. Well, and everybody have some peace. Osa says it is not hatred, it is speaking truth. Go back and listen to Trump and his people on TikTok, and you will see that they don't care about your views. They don't care about anything. One of his black pastors said he will believe Trump before Jesus Christ. How can people like that mean well for you? What they think of me. What did Reverend Cobbs used to say, Dwight? He said, it matters not what you think of me, but it matters the world what I think of you. That's to paraphrase him, right?
And if you go back 40 years or 50 years and look at some of the things that black preachers said about Dr. King,
oh my God,
you would be amazed. You would be appalled. I mean, that's your perspective, it's your point of view. I said that people evolve, people change if given the right environment, but they need an environment to grow. Up.
You think very
and
few
many
people
of the
are what?
races are beyond redemption.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the races, i.e., like in Boston, who refused to want to be bused with black children, ended up crying when Bill Russell died
Mm-hmm.
because he had become a personal hero for them. The same people that didn't want their children on the bus with black children
And wait a minute,
cried at his funeral.
and who threatened him when he was the Celtic?
Broke into his house.
Hey.
Broke into his house. Many of them cried at his funeral. I remember one of the most traumatic times in Chicago history, I'll never forget it, is when Walter Payton died.
Oh, yeah.
I saw people who ran us out of Cicero crying like babies because he had become, and his picture was on their wall.
Mm-hmm.
Because of their personalities and their charisma, became personal heroes of people who 10 years before were avid racers. I think very few people are beyond redemption if you give them an environment to convert and to grow.
Well,
that's what the Bible teaches us.
Amen. Osa, I don't think
And
we're
that
on.
has,
Oh, I was just responding to what Osa has written. I don't think we're on different pages, Osa. You said you will take someone that was racist in the 60s and change to someone who won't change from his racist ways in 2023. Well, I mean, I'm hearing you. I'm just trying to give people space. Because I don't think that anyone's beyond redemption. I mean, I don't. And you know what? I promise you, if the media decided to convince you that Donald Trump was a nice guy, they would do it. That's how powerful the media. Most of what we are doing right now is responding to a media narrative on him that was shaped by corporate media. Even focusing on the black women who are going to get him straight. We've racialized it instead of looking at the fact that is race part of it. This is very, 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 very small part of this. This is about power. Because these people are functionaries. This is a big fight within the surveillance state. This is way above my pay grade. I know that. So I mean, I'm sure that we're saying the same thing, Osa, to give people the space and the grace to change. And either you're going to give it to Donald Trump, you're going to give it to everybody, and that includes Donald Trump, or you're going to give it to no one, including yourself. With all due respect. Most of us don't like him, and we cannot give an intelligent answer as to why. Except Rachel Maddow told you not to like him. She told you, lied about Russia. Russia, it was a lie. The absolute lie. There are other international entities that interfere in our elections, and I won't mention them here. And they know it, but you dare not say it. I mean, just stop. The greatest interferer in our election, yes, is the Supreme Court and these state legislatures who are blocking you from voting. You don't have to look to Russia. Russia ain't thinking about you and your vote. As a matter of fact, it was the Russians who embarrassed America into giving us our civil rights laws. Isn't that right, Dwight? When Pravda printed the black children being hosed and bitten by the dogs. When they put that picture on the front of the state newspaper of the old USSR, it was an international embarrassment to white America. So within another couple of years, you had the Civil Rights Act, you had the Voting Rights Act, you had Fair Housing Act, you had all this stuff because we were looking like we were the most uncivilized people in the world. Just stop. All this talk about the preparing for war for China. Are you really going to have war on the people who are your bankers? They hold our debt. America was not even invited to this big BRICS conference, where the former colonized countries are reorganizing themselves, and they're the ones with the resources. They're the ones with the uranium, with the gold, with the diamonds, with the oil. They're the ones. Cuba's going. They're about to join OPEC. Get real. Stop living in this post-World War II world. It's a new world, darling. And somebody thought of the New World Order, and they went in one direction. These folks are coming at it from a different place, Dwight. These people are reorganizing as we speak. Dwight?
Well, the New World Order on this side is set up to preserve the Old World Order. That's the whole goal of the New World Order.
Absolutely.
It's to perpetuate the Old World Order. But the old world is not hearing of it. The old colonial hearing of it. They're setting up their own independent relationships without the colonizing nations being the go-between. You said something the other day that was very wrong. You said in Niger, they're required to use the franc, and they don't use the franc in France. The Caribbean countries are taking the Queen off of their money, the Queen's picture off of their money. This is a new day, y'all. And y'all could be singing God Save the Queen if you want to, but you're going to be on the wrong side of history when it's all over.
And pulling for Meghan to be queen of something. Queen of what? We're Americans. You shouldn't want a queen. You shouldn't want a king. What did Marvin Yancey sing? I'm a child of the king. My father is rich in houses and land. What did he sing? He holds the world in the palm of his hand.
The wealth of the world. The wealth of the world.
All right. The wealth of the world. And rubies and diamonds, silver and gold. I'm a child of the king wherever I go. That can be in the depths of the greatest poverty you find in the Mississippi Delta. It may or may not be in Buckingham Palace. I don't know. But wherever God is, I am covered and protected. And I am most important. I am smart. I am kind. Thank you, Viola Davis from The Help. Thank you. I don't need to have some stolen rubies and diamonds put on top of my head. And I don't need a Black woman to need that either. We're supposed to be fighting that. You walk up into that family that is preserved racism, and you tell me you didn't know that's what you were walking into. Child, please get out. Just deal with it and deal with your in-law stuff just like everybody else does. And maybe use your position to open the door for some other people over in the UK and throughout the Commonwealth to whom this family matters. And you can swing open the gates of opportunity for them. That's the best you can do. And that's what you ought to do. If you do that, you'll be performing a great, great service. Help return some of that wealth that your family stole back to them. How about that piece? I mean, I like them fine. I think they're great people. But I'm talking about what they stand for. And how we need to not get caught up in the hype. And have some clarity, y'all. Yeah, Robert, you said Santita. I mean it. Yeah, all of that. All of that. I'm done. So I love you. Dwight, I love you. Do you want to say anything before you go, aside from peace be unto us?
I'm fine.
Well, thank you, everybody. I love you. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I'm going to get a little rest today so that I can be better tomorrow. How about that? All right. Love y'all. Bye-bye.